Welcome to our Partner Perspective series. This is our opportunity to share the leaders that we learn and work with and enjoy with all of you. Today we have a great guest, Jill Monum from Grameen America. We've had the pleasure to work together several times over the last bunch of years. Fantastic organization, fantastic development team, and fantastic vice president of development and marketing in Jill. So Jill, welcome. Thanks so much for being with us, and thanks for the opportunity to be part of your work over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the introduction, and always good to be having a conversation with you, Craig.
Excellent. Thank you. So we'll jump in. Throughout your career, you've worked a lot in women's empowerment, both in the corporate world and in the nonprofit world. That landscape continues to evolve and has certainly evolved significantly over your career. What are the sort of key trends and opportunities you've observed, and how have these insights, influenced your approach?
Yeah, well, a few things. So I'll just start with saying, women continue to make strides. So that's a great headline to start with. I'm in an entrepreneurship space now. There's been a rise in female entrepreneurship. 40% of businesses are owned by women. They're opening businesses at a much higher rate than men as well. Workplace flexibility has been accelerated by the pandemic. We've seen an intersectionality of empowerment movements that have led to a greater recognition of the diverse experiences of women, of race and of ethnicity and backgrounds. And so all of that, I would also say importantly, there's been a rise in women getting involved in philanthropy and making philanthropic decisions. Big players we all know, Melinda French Gates, Mackenzie Scott, and really making some true impact there. So that's one to an opportunity. And the other, having been involved in both the corporate space, corporate philanthropy and corporate social responsibility, and then also in the nonprofit space, that corporate landscape has changed a lot as well. Corporations are far more sophisticated and strategic about their philanthropy, and they're also willing to talk about it, to have a conversation, to insert themselves into the conversation. So there's some opportunities with that we see. So saying this, that there's more of a focus on women's empowerment. We've received greater attention for these issues. Importantly, still only 2% of charitable giving, 2% of philanthropic dollars are given towards women. So how does that influence, the way I work or what I do? First of all, that says we need to educate. We still need to educate, and ensuring that people know that when we invest in women, that's a good place to put your money. Women, when we invest in women, we invest in entire communities. So money in the hands of women goes towards their children's education, the healthcare, for kids. And so that's just an important thing to remember. Talking about entrepreneurship, before I got into this space, 40% of businesses are owned by women. 4% of conventional small business loans are given to women. So that's $1 in $28, and 3% of venture capital. So there's an education there to start to understand the importance of bringing money to this area and what impact it can have. And then, just turning to the other on corporations as well, as we look to educate, and I came from that corporate sector and then started at Grameen working in corporate philanthropy, that there's a real opportunity to tell that story and to educate together. So with the rise, especially of digital, of social media and all of that over the past 15 years or so, they're willing to have a conversation. They want to talk to consumers. They want to show consumers and their employees, the good work that they're doing. So together we can really create that win-win and that partnership to not only direct funding towards the causes that, we care about, but also to educate. So I think there's just a lot of great work that's been done, but there's a lot of opportunity out there still.
Absolutely. And it's been that 2% number, and really all those numbers are like, they just really drive home for you, like just how much more work there is to be done. But organizations like, Grameen America and your work are really on the leading edge of this. And it's been fantastic to watch. So, as the leader of Grameen's philanthropic and marketing initiatives, really the organization, has scaled and grown in reputation and in impact and in all the ways, really transformed over the 9 years that you've been there. What challenges have you and your team navigated as you've kind of become the, premier nonprofit microfinance organization in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of challenges for sure, as any organization that's growing has, but a lot of achievements also. I'm really proud of the team, and just not only my own team, but just the entire team across the organization and how we've navigated and handled things. And one thing I would say, I'm just really proud of the organization and what we've navigated and what we've all gone through is the global pandemic and COVID. And I think it just sort of illustrates some of the strengths of the organization and what we've continued to navigate as a fundraising team as well. I mean, just to step back and say, at that time, when everything was shut down, we were serving 50,000 women across the country, all small business owners, right? And so all of their businesses were shut down. So taking a look at, first, how do we navigate this and keep the business alive, keep the organization going so we can be there for the women, but also on that human side, how can we continue to be there for them? So, starting with, flipping upside down our model, we were meeting with women every single week in person in their places of business or communities, switching that to all, it was conference calls at first, it was later Zoom calls, just to engage with them, keep engaged, to keep our organization running. And then on the human side of it, why are we doing this? So that we can support these women. So from there, it was, what's going on and how do we support them? We saw, we dropped our interest rates to zero. We, supported a recovery loan. We connected them to food pantries, health resources, other local resources. So it kind of showed us our business agility, our organizational agility, as well as the importance of keeping your community or your cause right at the center of all the decisions that you make. So in that, speaking to sort of the challenge on the fundraising side, we had just launched not that long before that a campaign, in partnership with you all, which we can talk more about as well. But, we were in the middle of the messaging for this campaign, and we were all now operating in a completely different space. So understanding then at the same time that we were at this intersection of what was going on, the public discourse at that time. It was small businesses, it was low-income communities, disadvantaged communities, people of color, health disparities. And we had something to say about all of that because we were right there on the ground with them. And so, first ensuring that we partnered with the programs team and with the field staff that was on the ground working with these women. What's going on in the community, and how can we help? And so that close partnership was really important to create the messaging that we needed. And so, I would say with that, understanding what's going on the ground so we could communicate it, but then also tweaking that messaging to sound like, what everyone else was talking about, so that our message was relevant. So I would say, at that time, if you remember, there were PPP loans. The government was giving out loans to help small businesses stay alive, so that they could, continue to pay employees. We worked to try to get our women access to this funding. We made a concerted, organization-wide effort, not just the programs team. It was finance, HR, whoever could volunteer and help. And we were, out of the 50,000 women, only able to help about less than 50 women gain access to these loans, just due to systemic barriers, paperwork, language, all kinds of barriers. At the same time, and it was about 150,000 we were able to get them access to. At the same time, we were working with them, over the course of April through the end of the year, we dispersed $250 million in loans to this community. So to be able to then take that story and say, here's what's going on, here's how we can help, and really be agile with our messaging to take advantage of that, where that money was, and bring it and direct it, to those communities. And I would say that is that's definitely a challenge as things shift, and that ability to be agile, during shifting times is important. And I think that's something I'm very proud of as our team, that, coming on board, just continuing to evolve the storytelling and, how we're growing as an organization and why it is that we need more money and what that impact is, taking donors from the $50,000 level, which we're always celebrating every gift, as a fundraiser, it's all important. But as the funding need grows, because we're serving more and more women and more communities, how do we bring those people along with us to then start to get also those 7- and 8-figure gifts that we really need? And that, that's a journey that we've been on that, certainly been an exciting one, and one, pretty proud of achieving, I think, as we, in my time here at Grameen.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I've always been super impressed by your abilities to, like, as an organization and as individual leaders, to like take have your narrative continue to evolve to be relevant, like in the conversations you're having and what's going on in the world, but also the ability to kind of like, I was most impressed when we worked with you all. I went to one of the meetings with the entrepreneurs, and it was like this really cramped space. And it was like, I felt like 100 women, like all in there, and like everybody was talking. For the first time ever, I really understood what you did. I was like, oh, I get it now. Like, yeah, I get the energy. But the fact that we're able to kind of keep that community through sort of changing that model, which many people said at the time, like, this won't work if you don't do it this way, right? Like, we've evolved the way that you've been able to do it a little bit out of necessity, but I think it's helped you scale incredibly, which is cool. So again, you referenced our work together, right? And we've been very proud to do that. I think back starting in like 2018, we helped you all you were on a sort of $300 million growth initiative. 100 million of that was going to be philanthropy. We were able to work with you to design that, launch that. More recently, you're now in the $1 billion effort of growth that's going to really sort of continue to transform and scale the organization. The Women Are Limitless piece of that is going to be about $300 million in philanthropy, which is super exciting. How did you find working with us? Like, how did we add value to your work? Hopefully you'll say we did, but how was the experience working with us, working with Orr Group?
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. Headlines here. It was great working with you all, and to dive into that detail. Yeah, we underwent last year a huge strategic planning process, resulting, after 15 years of success and proven impact and scalability and sustainability, what's next for us? And talking about this $1 billion strategy, it's $1 billion over 5 years. But this will help us to then deliver in 10 years, 40 billion in loans to, women in these communities from 4 billion now. So that's 10 times the growth to 750,000 women, which is, 4 times the number of women. So we are looking at, breakout growth and impact at this point in our trajectory. So, I'd say the first campaign and to the second one as well, but especially the first campaign that we worked on, we're taking the organization again to the next level, but this is the first really big step change. So like, how are we going to do this? Like, what, just really the how, and helping us to be that thought leader in, again, as I alluded to before, every gift matters, but like, you need gifts at this level, but you need to start to get gifts at this level. And how do we do that? And putting up the structure around it, the research around it, diving into current donors, what are other future donors? So the real mechanics of that and that thought leadership around it. And then also remembering, kind of keeping us on track, on task, because, we get busy doing our work, but it's like making sure we're lifting our heads up, like, okay, hey, here's these big donors we really need to get to. What's the progress made on these? So it was a real nuts and bolts how of it, and real that partnership there. And then I would say, secondly, in that campaign, but very much in this one as well, is we talked about the messaging, the why, and what makes us think we can do this, but also what's the messaging around it. We had just gone through, again, this strategic planning process, resulting in a 40-page, plus appendix strategy. How do we boil that down to the essence of it, of like, what's the impact? What are we doing? What's the urgent need? And thinking through all that. And as an, having that expertise in it, but coming in from the outside and being able to talk through that really helped us to hone our messaging on how we were going to communicate this. But also what gave us the confidence that we could do it, that, we do have a compelling plan to operationalize your big gift. We do have a proven record of impact and scalability. We have a dynamic leadership team that can go out and help us to talk about this. So, that helping us to understand and build the confidence, and also talk to the board about how we were going to get this done and what their role was, and convincing them too that, this is a big stretch, but, we're going to go for it, and it is achievable.
That's fantastic. And right. And at least in the first case, you achieved it even quicker than I think we all thought you would. Fingers crossed that that'll be the experience again this time. So, I've always learned from and valued, talking to you and your partnership. So as you just think, what advice would you give other nonprofit leaders out there that are watching this?
Yeah, a few pieces. I always love, I actually now, have been listening to some of the other leaders. Now I know about this library that you have. It's a wealth of great information. So, happy to share, some of what I think I've learned as well. And one, just embracing our mission-driven culture. That sounds kind of obvious, but I know, Craig, you have said this as well. And we feel sort of the same way, that we're very fortunate to be in these fields in which the work we're doing every day is making a difference. It's making an impact. And not every organization can say that. Corporations, they're creating values, or maybe it's philanthropy, or they're trying to create that purpose. Everybody needs a purpose. That's how humans, that's what drives us, right? So just embracing that we have that and not forgetting it and taking it for granted, that clear and compelling mission not only is going to guide your strategy and lift up the voices of the community, or if you're talking about the environment or whatever, lift that voice and keep it at the center of what you're doing, but it's also going to motivate your employees and your team. And so, just not taking that for granted and keeping it at the center of what we do. Another thing I would say that I try to do is prioritize decision-driven and data-driven decisions, or prioritizing that data in my decision-making. And I say that at the high organizational level for organizations, but also taking it all the way to the personal level. So, we work hard. We're at our computers. I'm wearing glasses now because I'm on Zoom all the time. It's definitely not because I'm getting older. But we work very hard. So let's make sure that what we're doing is actually making an impact. And, funders have been pushing us in this direction. That's another trend we've seen, right? That they want to see the impact. What are my dollars doing? But I think it's a good way to push us, because, if we're working really hard and we're not making a difference, then let's scrap that and find another strategy that does work. And so that's, organizationally, but taking it to the personal level as well, as we grow as leaders, going from this is our scope of work to this, to this, to this, trying to prioritize and figure out what is the best use of my time. Is it answering these emails right now, or can that wait for a second? Because I really need to take a look at, this strategy to try to get in this, 7 or 8 figure gift. So, and I do that with my team as well. What is this project you're working on? What's the ROI? Let's make sure that what you're doing is, there's a good return on our investment here to the best possible. And I think the last thing for me that's key is supporting our own well-being and the well-being of our teams. We said it, we're very fortunate to be doing this work, but it can be hard work sometimes. It's, we're solving and trying to solve some of the world's greatest challenges. And sometimes that needle moves a little more slowly than we want it to. And, we don't want to burn out, especially fundraisers. We know it's a burnout, sort of section of our industry. So just prioritizing that well-being for yourself and your team, whether that's family, exercise, meditation, shutting off the computer for a while, taking the vacation. And part of doing that to enable that is also fostering collaboration among the organization, among your team, so that nobody is, burning the midnight oil while other members of the team are knocking off early. So those are just a couple of things that I try to keep top of mind as I continue to navigate and do the work that we're all doing together.
Yeah, that's great advice all around, and absolutely right. Like, we are privileged and fortunate to get to do this work. And you're totally right that we are not, in fact, getting older. That is not the reason for any ailments that either of us may be suffering from. But thank you, Jill, so much for your friendship, for your partnership, for being here today, doing this, and just most importantly, thank you for what you do every day. It's so important and so valuable. We appreciate you. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you.